All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to deconstruct an ancient story. But not just as history. We're looking at it as a brilliant case study in strategy, in communication, and in leadership.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the strategic hub, this incomplete message he finds, a major pivot, the clash between authentic power and magic, what happens when faith hits people's fortunes, and finally, the legacy of that first love.
Okay, first things first, let's set the stage. You've got to understand Ephesus wasn't just some random city. No, it was a total powerhouse in Roman Asia. We're talking a major hub for trade, a melting pot of all kinds of cultures, and a deeply, deeply religious center. So choosing Ephesus, that was a calculated strategic move.
And to really get the scale of the challenge Paul was walking into, you have to wrap your head around the Temple of Artemis. I mean, this was one of these 7 wonders of the ancient world. But it was so much more than just a building. It was the absolute engine of the city's economy and the very core of its identity. The stakes here, they literally could not have been higher.
So Paul gets there, and you'd think his first problem would be pushback from the city, right? But nope, his first challenge actually comes from the inside. He finds this small group of about a dozen followers who are, dedicated, but they have a totally incomplete picture of the whole mission.
So he asked them this really direct, really clarifying question. And their answer is, well, it's pretty stunning. It basically reveals they'd only ever heard of the baptism of John. Now, that was a powerful message, for sure. But it was all about preparation. It wasn't the full story, not even close. So Paul has to step in and clarify this huge distinction. See, John's baptism was all about repenting for the past. It was about preparing the way. But the message Paul was bringing, that was about receiving actual spiritual power to transform the future. Think of it like this. It's the difference between getting an invitation and getting ready for the party. And the party actually started.
Okay, so Paul kicks off his outreach in the usual spot, the local synagogue. But pretty quickly, bam, he hits a wall of resistance. And this is where we see his strategic genius really come to life.
So for 3 months, he's in the synagogue making his case, arguing persuasively. This was his plan A, his standard operating procedure. It was the go-to platform to reach the local Jewish community.
Yeah, that didn't last long. The text tells us that some people just got, obstinate. They started publicly trashing his message, which they called the way. And that hostile rejection, it forces Paul to completely rethink his entire approach.
But does he give up? No way. Instead, he pivots, and this is brilliant. He moves his daily discussions to the lecture hall of Tyrannus. Now, the Greek word here is skole. Sound familiar? It's the root for our word school. It was this neutral, public marketplace of ideas, a place literally designed for intellectual discussion. He took a major setback and turned it into an even better launchpad.
Okay, and this is where the conflict really escalates. It moves way beyond just a debate of ideas and becomes a full-on demonstration of power. You have to remember, this city, Ephesus, was absolutely steeped in magic, charms, amulets, the whole occult scene.
And it all leads to this wild, direct confrontation. There's this group of local exorcists, the 7 sons of Sceva, who try to use the name of Jesus like it's just another magic spell. Well, it backfires big time. They get publicly and physically humiliated by an evil spirit that basically says, Jesus I know, and I know about Paul, but who are you? Man, that event sent a shockwave through the whole city. It proved that this power wasn't some trick you could learn. It was a real relationship you had to have.
And the fallout from that incident? It sparked a massive cultural shift. I mean, people who practiced sorcery started coming forward in public, confessing what they'd been doing. And then they brought all their magic scrolls and books and burned them in this giant citywide bonfire. And the value of all that stuff they torched? A staggering 50,000 drachmas.
Now, just to put that number in perspective for you, 50,000 drachmas was the equivalent of more than 130 years of wages for a regular laborer. Just let that sink in. This wasn't just some spring cleaning. This was a costly, public, all-in rejection of their entire old way of life.
So the message is spreading like wildfire. It's so successful, in fact, that it starts to seriously disrupt the city's entire economic structure. And that, right there, leads us directly to the story's climax.
Enter a silversmith named Demetrius. This guy's entire business, his whole livelihood, depends on making and selling these little silver shrines of the goddess Artemis. And now, he's watching his profits plummet. He sees this new message as a direct threat to his wallet, and he decides he's got to do something about it.
And what he does is ignite this powerful chain reaction. And notice how cleverly he frames the conflict. He doesn't make it about religion. No, he makes it about economics, our prosperity, he says, and about civic pride. He brilliantly turns a theological debate into an existential threat to the entire city. It's a masterclass in manipulation.
And just like that, the whole situation explodes into a full-blown riot. The city is thrown into chaos. Thousands of people flood into the massive city theater, and for hours they're just chanting in a frenzy. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. They're defending their goddess, sure, but they're also defending their economy and their entire identity.
Eventually, the dust settles and Paul leaves Ephesus. But his stay there, which was about 2 to 3 years by the way, the longest he ever stayed in one place, it leaves this permanent mark. He established what would become one of the most influential and important churches in the ancient world.
And you can really see the long-term impact right here on this timeline. The foundation Paul laid was just so strong that Ephesus became a central hub for Christianity for decades to come. I mean, we're talking about a place where other major leaders, like Timothy and even the Apostle John, would later come to minister.
But there's a final twist to the story. Years later, this same church, the one born from all that passionate, costly commitment we just talked about, gets a pretty sobering warning in the book of Revelation. The message was basically, you're doing everything right, you're doctrinally sound, you work hard, you endure, but you've lost your first love. That initial fire, the passion that started the whole thing, it had faded.
And that's what the story of Paul in Ephesus really shows us. When a truly disruptive idea takes hold, it doesn't just change a few minds. It challenges entire economies, entire cultures, the very foundation of a society. And it leaves a legacy that forces every single generation, yep, including our own, to stop and ask what truly, truly matters most.